Welcome to Attractions and Beyond, the podcast that talks about everything theme parks. Today, I thought I'd cover a little subject that I've been thinking about for quite a long time, and actually it's something that really means a lot to me. We are going to be talking about, as you've seen by the title, the unfortunate and sad decline of Alton Towers. Now we actually know this park has been in decline for quite some time now, and in this podcast I thought I'd talk about everything that's causing massive problems at the resort at this present time. And I think it's one of them things that just needs to be discussed. There's a lot of people out there that say there's nothing wrong. There's a lot of people who are like me who agree there are problems, and we're not just moaning. We don't just moan about this, but we are literally just giving constructive criticism, because deep down, me, you, a lot of theme park enthusiasts really do care about this place, and we just want to see it do well. You know, years ago, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, the place was thriving. You know, nobody could stop them. They were building new rides every year. They were just investing into the park. There was a lot of entertainment. And now we're actually really lucky if we get any significant investment at all. So yeah, this is the podcast on the sad decline of Alton Towers. And we're just going to talk about what's really been happening at this park the last couple of years. This really started in 2023, from what I know anyway, and visiting. But since then, ride availability has been absolutely awful. You know, every year we've been saying, oh, hopefully it gets better. You know, they have the winter period to like work on the rides, do a bit more maintenance. But every single year since then, it has been really bad. 2023 is when we really noticed it. And then 2024, it was just ridiculous. On most of my visits, there was like 5-6 rides down at one time. And it was a real shame that year, because it was such an exciting season to start anywhere. We had the reopening of Nemesis into Nemesis Reborn. You know, it's looking really positive. You know, we had this best season ever video. We had Hex reopening. Hex didn't reopen till like Scarefest time, from what I remember. The Sky Ride was off all year, which we'll get onto that later on in this podcast. There was just so many issues that year. And with Nemesis Reborn, it was fantastic. You know, the year before, there was Curse Alton Manor in 2023. So the last 2 years, they've really invested. And I say invested, yes, it wasn't completely brand new attractions, but they were amazing refurbs, if you like. You know, the Curse Alton Manor was previously Jewel, which Jewel was looking in a bit of a poor state for quite a while. So they definitely needed to do that upgrade to something a bit more exciting. And that's exactly what they did with the Curse Alton Manor. What a fantastic dart ride. I still say to this day that that's the best dart ride that Towers have had in quite a few years. And when I often visit, I say, which is actually better? Is Curse Alton Manor better? Is Hex better? It's really difficult because I love both of them, but I do think that little update they did on Hex when it was closed for a bit, when they did a bit of refurb on that, that's kind of ruined a bit. Disco Hex, in other words. But yeah, Curse Alton Manor is fantastic. And like I said, with Nemesis Reborn, much better than the original in terms of the theming. Whether it actually rides better than the original is a bit of a sore subject. Some people say it's horrible. Some people say it's all right. A lot of people say it doesn't ride as well as the original, but I think it's, you know, fantastic. And that's the real sad part about Alton Towers the last few years, is some of the stuff they've done is fantastic, like with Nemesis Reborn, with Curse Alton Manor, and obviously last year we had Toxicator. There's been a lot of things, but I think with Merlin, the problem is they build these amazing things. You know, they're fantastic, but they just don't keep on top of them. And we have seen that this year with Toxicator. No fountains, you know, that's part of the ride experience, you know, having the fountains. So whatever happened to that, I have no idea. I've heard rumours like its filtration system is not working to the way it should be. So it's things like that that really just, they take away from the experience and the immersion. It's like the queue line. It doesn't look like they've touched that over winter. And in terms of winter work, God knows what they've been doing there this year as well. You know, a lot of the rides are down for maintenance. There's scaffolding on buildings, round attractions. There's lots of paint peeling off the buildings. It's just really sad, isn't it? You know, you walk around that park and you think, what have they actually done? It just doesn't look good. And we all know that Merlin is not really doing the best at the moment. And part of that problem is they try to expand too quick. Way too quick, you know. Instead of focusing on their core parks and attractions that make them the most money, they just thought, let's keep building attraction and attraction and attraction and attraction. And it's just got out of hand. You know, now they're having to sell attractions because they just can't afford to keep them going anymore. And I wouldn't be surprised somewhere down the line if Alton Towers ends up being sold off to somebody else. I mean, I've heard rumours that there is a potential sale, but I think for the best interest of the park, I do think it needs to be sold. Sell it to somebody who actually cares, because at the moment Merlin don't care. They sack off all their entertainments, and granted, the outsourced entertainments, but still, you had all them amazing people work there for years, and they just decided to go, no, we don't want you anymore, so we're going to sack you off, outsource, get brand new staff in. And I do think that's quite out of order, to be honest. And it's the same with the food. A couple of years ago, they outsourced the food to a company called Aramark, which is a sore subject. The food at Aramark is terrible, and I'm going to say it right here and right now. Overpriced garbage. I just think it's terrible, and this is the reason why a lot of people take their own food. A hot dog, nearly 10 quid. I mean, I'm pretty sure at the start of the season, or just before the season started this year, they said it was like £10.30. Who's going to pay that for a hot dog? It's just absolutely crazy to me. And I just think this is one of them things, we're living in a cost of living crisis at the moment. You need to make your prices a bit more reasonable, because the amount you charge for your food is shocking and a disgrace, in my opinion. So they should have never outsourced the food to Aramark. You think back years ago, you got decent food for a lot lower price, and you had it in proper boxes, proper packaging. It just comes in like this. It just looks terrible. I can't even think of a way to put it, but the food's the problem. That's a big problem with Alton Towers at the minute, and Merlin in general. They're saying that when you go to Fort Park, the food is actually cheaper. It's still Aramark, but the food is actually not too bad. I mean, I had the food at Fort Park last year or the year before. But unfortunately, at Alton Towers, they just don't see the market. They just really don't see it at all. They've actually started putting billboards around the park because they know people don't buy the food. And also for pass holders, they've done a special perk where it's like a certain price off after a certain time. I think that's in pizza pasta, or you get a certain discount. I can't remember exactly. I'm not actually a Merlin pass holder anymore. I have a Pleasure Beach pass, but not Merlin. But it's the first time in quite a few years I've not had a Merlin pass. I've got the Alton Towers pass because I will visit there now and again. I'm over 2 hours away, but I will go now and again. I did go the day after opening day, and it's a brilliant day, to be fair. But the food, I just take my lunchbox, take my sandwiches, take my crisps, take whatever, and it's just much cheaper, and you're getting better quality as well. I wouldn't want to be eating the Aramark food at all. It's just not good. And I think one of the biggest problems with the park at the minute is the David Walliams land. Now, I'm surprised for this season that IP was not pulled, considering the stuff going over winter. I'm really surprised they haven't pulled that IP. I'm pretty sure why they didn't do that is because they've already got a per ride availability. They haven't got enough filler rides. You definitely notice that on busier days on 4 p.m. closes. There's just not enough filler, so the bigger rides are struggling. But the world of David Walliams, I never knew why they went for that IP. IPs are a problem anywhere. That they're no good. You get a certain contract on them. The popularity might die down. There's so many issues with IPs, and they cost a lot of money as well. So I think Alton Towers definitely do benefit with their original themes. People love 13, Nemesis, Oblivion, their original themes. So I just never understood why IPs they thought was a good idea. At Chessington World of Adventures, they're opening Paw Patrol and Minecraft, which it's a shame because that was one of my favourite, if not my favourite Merlin park, but it definitely isn't now because of all these IPs. And let's just hope that does not come to Alton Towers because it just won't work at all. So I'm very surprised with the David Walliams IP that it wasn't pulled. And I do think it's a massive waste of space at the back of the park as well, because you've only got the Royal Carousel, Raj's Bouncy Bottom Burp. You did actually have a Sizzler ride known as Flavio's Fabulous Fandango, and that was removed a bit later on. And of course, you've got the main attraction, which is Gangster Granny the ride as well, which was never really the highest quality of dark ride. But I definitely think this area needs a massive strip down, completely remove everything, start again, or keep Gangster Granny the ride, but theme it more to the characters. I don't think that'll actually go down a lot more better than it does now. And don't get me wrong, that back section of the park has never been that great anywhere, but it's just so sad when you walk down there. Now, you've got the Burger Kitchen, which, from what I know, is currently still covered in scaffolding. You've got the World of David Walliams, like I was just mentioning, which is just it's just a waste of space. And then you've got this massive building that had the dungeons in, but it's had amazing dark rides in there before. It's had Around the World in 80 Days, it's had Toyland Tours, it's had Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and they've just got a building sitting there doing nothing with a dark ride in it, a boat ride. All they're using it for now is Scarefest for Amigos in the Afterlife, and that's just set up all year long, so it's just sitting there doing nothing. It's really sad seeing the back of that park. It just feels so abandoned and empty. A lot of people don't go up there, The days where Toyland Tours was there, it was thriving a lot more from what I remember, but now it just feels like a ghost town. And then, of course, you've got the Sky Ride, which this one is an absolute shambles. It was closed all throughout 2023, 2024, and then it came back in 2025, but it didn't come back at the start of the season. Now, that is a long refurb. It's a multi-million-pound project, and now we're in a situation in 2026 where it's still not ready, and it had this massive investment. Like, what is going on with the Sky Ride? You know, the transport systems are so important. You got the Sky Ride, the monorail, because the monorail gets you from the car parks to the main entrance, which is already a long walk. You know, you're talking 15, 20 minutes before you've even got into the park. That's not on. So fair play to Alton Towers. They've actually put some bus services, like replacement buses on, which is absolutely fantastic. They didn't have to do it, but they did. And let's be fair, they needed to, because, you know, a lot of people could not walk that far, you know. I managed to do it, but... You know, I don't struggle, but I know a lot of people would. And so you haven't got your monorail, and then you haven't got the Sky Ride to get around the park, which is a big problem. And I do think they should have always got a land train. If the Sky Ride was a big issue, they should have got a land train to get... So you wouldn't be able to do it around the whole park because the gradients are too steep. But you could have got it round the main front sections, so around Tower Street up to X Sector, maybe up to Dark Forest and Fountain Square. But... you know, they haven't even done that, which is just a shame. And, you know, the Sky Ride, it's one of them that it can't even run when it's hot. But then saying that, they class hot as like 15 degrees or something. So it's just a bit of a shame that they spent all that money on it and it's still closed. It was open last year, but it didn't even feel like it was open that much, to be honest. Not as much as it used to be. And I do think having your two main transport systems around the park is essential. And the fact that they're not ready... It's just a bit of a joke, let's be honest. As you can see, there is so many problems with the park. And then we've got one which really does add to the rides, but unfortunately it doesn't when they're not working. So you've got all the effects, so many, you know, that are not working on rides. Currently, you've got the fire on Big Bob, so on Wicker Man. That's not been working since the start of the season. You've got the water fountains on Toxicator. That's not working. It's just things like this that really add to the experience. And the fact that these things are not being kept on top on is just a bit of a shame. And it's the same with the roller coaster restaurant. I don't know if you guys have actually noticed, but it now says the roller coaster rant instead of the roller coaster restaurant. They've not even fixed the sign, so I just don't know. I do think with Alton Towers and Merlin in general, you know, with Merlin and Alton Towers, they do some things really well. They did a lovely projection show on the Towers for Alton After Dark. That was fantastic. I absolutely adored that show. You know, the corkscrew's been painted up, albeit not by actual Alton Towers staff. It was painted by winners from this competition with the Merlin Pass, I believe. The corkscrew looks brilliant. I wasn't sure how it looked, because obviously it doesn't fit with the plaza now. But I really like it. It's a throwback to the original colours, which is really nice. But overall, I do think the park is really falling behind now as to being one of the worst parks in the UK. And I hate to say it, I really hate to say it, because it used to be one of the best. It used to be the jewel in the crown. It just used to be so magical when you went. And I don't know if it's one of those that, because we've gotten older, that we don't enjoy it as much now, but then surely not. Like, you know, I go to Universal and Disney and that still feels magical, like when I was a kid. So I don't know, it's just a bit of a shame. I do think as well, another main issue with the park as well is accessibility. You know, I've heard things like the wheelchair accessibility, like the lifts to get you up. So I think they have one on Wicker Man and Smiler are not actually working at the minute, and they've not been working for the whole season. I don't even think the Smiler one was working for a lot of last year from what I heard, but I can't remember. You know, accessibility is so important, you know, and the fact they're also discriminating against that as well is not great. Another big one that a lot of people talk about as well is opening hours. So 4 p.m. closes, that is crazy, especially from what I've seen recently with school trips just before Easter. I mean, you kind of expect that just before the holidays, but seeing 4 p.m. closes, especially with the lack of rides that they actually have at the minute, is not ideal. You know, when Universal actually come here in a few years' time, they'll be laughing at our opening hours. They're just shocking. You know, especially a park the size of Alton Towers, you know, they need to be open till 5 o'clock. It's just crazy with the opening hours. Albeit they did have Alton After Dark again, which was absolutely great. You know, I'm glad they brought that back. They could have easily said, no, we're not doing it. But they did bring it back, and I'm a massive fan of that. We want to see more of these later opening hours. And I know it's really difficult for them to do it because of the location, because of noise complaints, etc. But I do think they could do a few more later opening hours, especially in the summer when it gets massively busy. And a massive thing that's coming to this season as well is the time they open the turnstiles and staggered ride openings. So the turnstiles always opened at 9 o'clock. Dead on 9 o'clock, you can get in the park an hour before the rides actually opened. Happy days, you can queue, and then that's it. But now they don't open the turnstiles till 9:30. And from what I saw on opening day, it looked absolutely chaos. It was piling back really far away. I think in the summer, that's going to be a massive problem. So I do think they need to look at that. And they're also losing out on a lot of money as well. You think the longer you have people standing out on the main entrance plaza, they're not going to be spending. At least when you get them into the park early, you open Towers Trading and Corner Coffee, they'll be spending money. But just by standing out on the plaza, they're not going to be spending anything. So those turnstiles need to be back open at 9 o'clock. And of course, staggered ride openings. So you'd have your rides open at 10 o'clock, but then you'd have other rides opening at 11 o'clock, which is crazy as well, and some of them rides weren't even just filler rides. Not that they've got many anywhere, but they weren't really filler rides. They were big coasters. There was 3 big coasters. From what I remember, there was 13 Galactica, Spinball Whizzer. They were opening at 11. It's just crazy. That just causes chaos. Because you open 13, you've only got Rita in the Dark Forest from 10 o'clock. That's if it opens on time. Because the problem is with staggered ride openings is it relies literally on the rides that are meant to open at 10 o'clock to open bang on time. But even those rides don't open on time. Or they could open at 10:30 or near 11 when the other staggered opening rides are on. And it just causes chaos, because people are pre-queuing, but then it's blocking the pass around the area. So I think the staggered ride openings was a really bad idea. I have no idea if it's been diminished now. I mean, I'd hope it would be, but by the sounds of it, I'm not entirely sure. You think from a ride that's already struggling with capacity, they've got some rides opening at 10. And then other rides open at 11. And then when the Congo River Rapids opens in May, this is another one, that doesn't open till May. Battle Galleons doesn't open till May. And then the Runaway Mine Train, we don't know at the minute. It's closed for essential maintenance. They've not actually announced when that's reopening. It could still be a while, but that's 3 rides there. That's the whole of Katanga Canyon with the Rapids and Mine Train. So it's a whole area out. I'm surprised for the season they've kept that area open, but then they do have pizza and pasta, which is where they'll be making the money. There's just nothing going on in that area at all. And I won't be surprised if when Congo River Rapids does open, they won't open till 12, 1 o'clock, some point midday. Because with Rapids rides in general, they cost a lot of money to run. It's probably the most expensive ride. It is the ride, but it's mainly the staff to run it as well, because they need staff stationed all the way around. So it does cost a lot to run. It's mainly the staff, the cost of running with the staff, than it is the actual ride itself. And of course, down at Fort Park, they did remove their Rapids, but it's closed, and that's Rumba Rapids. Unfortunately, that's closed down. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Congo River Rapids does end up closing in the next couple of years. I really hope it doesn't get to that point, because it really makes that area, it really ties it together, doesn't it? With the whole Congo, Rapids, around the actual mine train. I love it. I just hope they never get rid of it. I know it's not really exciting. It doesn't really do much, but it just ties the whole area together. There's so many things that we could talk about with the sad decline of Alton Towers. And, it is really sad that we should be even mentioning the decline of Alton Towers. But I feel like I had to make this podcast just to actually get some things off my chest, because I've been thinking about these things for so long, and it's just been building up. And I decided to make this channel, Attractions and Beyond. And I thought, let's do podcasts and let's talk about theme park, anything theme park related. I thought the first thing I need to do is talk about the current situation that Alton Towers is in, and the unfortunate financial crisis of Merlin at the minute, because it's not really good at all. Back when the parks reopened just after COVID, when that big explosion of visitor numbers happened, it got so busy, That's probably when the park actually did well. And I do think a lot of problems don't really stem from COVID. I think it's more to do with that incident, unfortunately, back in 2015 with the Smile. I think that's caused a lot of problems, and it's had a massive long-term effect, because, there was a lot of redundancies then, a lot of ride removals. There was just so much cut down. I think that's definitely had a big effect over time. And you'd think, well, it's over 10 years ago. It's 11 years ago this year, but still it's had that bigger long-term effect. And I think if that had not had happened in 2015, I think the situation at Alton Towers could be very different today. What they should have really done after that post-COVID boom as they should have thought, right, okay, we've made all this money, we're doing well now, so we'll put it back into the parks. But instead they decided to start building other Legolands, other attractions, and that just doesn't work. And unfortunately it's come to bite them back now because, they're struggling, they're having to sell off attractions. Hopefully they can recover from it, but it doesn't sound very good. And I think the actual lack of care for so long has really caught up with them. And whoever actually makes the investment to buy the park after they've sold, then there's going to be a lot of work to do. And, we've got a massive problem with flat ride. They've taken rides out like Enterprise, Submission, Ripsaw, which has been replaced by Toxicator, but it did take 10 years to do it. Twirling Toadstool, Energize, so many flat rides, Blade, and they just haven't replaced them. And that's what really frustrated me, because they got Toxicator in 2025, but then they thought, okay, we'll take out Blade. And obviously it was coming to the end of its life, but they definitely should have had some sort of idea of what to do with that space. Got another flat ride in, another pirate ship, something else to fill that gap, because obviously there's just a big empty pit now, and we would have been better off because we would have had Toxicator, we would have had Blade, Subterra, Galactica, Nemesis. We would have had so many rides, but unfortunately we've still got a lot in that area, but unfortunately we could have had, because there's nothing for families now in Forbidden Valley. That's what was good about having Blade, because it's pretty much a thrill focused area, and now we haven't got any family attractions. So you have your families who will go up there, who will go and ride Nemesis, Subterra, Galactica. They're going to ride all the big rides, but then obviously there's nothing for the kids to ride. So it's just a bit of a shame, really, to be honest. There could have been another family flat ride right there in Forbidden Valley. And of course, we haven't had a couple of flats down in X Sector for a long time. We haven't had anything in Dark Forest. I definitely think they need 2 flats down in X Sector, which hopefully they will come round to doing at some point. But I do think with everything going on at the minute, I think that's very unlikely. Galactica was meant to be getting a retheme to fit more in with the Phalanx since they rethemed Nemesis. But I don't think that's going to happen now. That was cut. That was supposed to happen last year. That hasn't happened. We have had Bluey this year, is great, but we definitely need that next big investment to get people excited, talking about Alton Towers again. I think the whole park needs a whole marketing refresh. It needs a new identity, because it's had the same identity for so long. If you ever watch the TV adverts, they literally reuse the same clips. It's just so boring. They definitely need something a bit more exciting going on. Get people coming back to the park, but get people talking about it, because unfortunately there's so much negativity online about Alton Towers, and it's such a shame, because you think what it was back years and years ago, and I know things change, but with Alton Towers and Merlin, it's definitely not changed for the better. And I do think, it's just going to keep going in a downward spiral, unfortunately, leading up to Universal, unless they're saving money. Unless they're saving money, ready for Universal, but they really need to start investing now to have it up to standards when that opens in 2031. So the food's bad, ride availability is not great, albeit it was better last year, but it's still not at the point where it should be. The accessibility is a bit of a joke. The opening hours are questionable. Your 4 p.m. closes. They have some good opening hours, like at Scarefest, like when they had Alton After Dark. And that leads me on to talk about events, because I was going to mention it a bit earlier when I was talking about the parks reopening after COVID. Decided to do all these events. You had Mardi Gras, you had Oktoberfest, you did have Festival of Thrills, which came in 2022, but unfortunately the year after, it wasn't that great. It was a Smiler takeover, and then after that they got rid of it, which I don't mind because it was poor that second year. But the year before was fantastic when they had all the bands playing around the areas. That was absolutely great. Mardi Gras, the atmosphere for Mardi Gras was fantastic. If you ever visited it, it was just so much fun. There was so much entertainment everywhere. You had Food Street, which went past the towers. Unfortunately, in the final year, they didn't have that there because they decided to put all the stages in one place. But they had different crews for different areas. So you had the X Sector crew, the Forbidden Valley crew. It was fantastic. There was so much energy. The first year was like a trial process because they didn't have actual stage time, so you don't know when the entertainment was on. But then the year after, they had all the times, and it was so much fun. I went loads of times to Mardi Gras, and I know it's one of them events that, some people weren't fussed about, but then some people really enjoyed it. And Oktoberfest, obviously, that got axed for last year. It didn't come back, which is a shame because that was such a fun event. Sitting there on the lawns, having a beer, watching entertainment. There was nothing like it. It was so good. And I think it's one of them, you think because they were cutting back or they completely removed the events like Mardi Gras, Festival of Thrills and Oktoberfest to put more money into the bigger events like Scarefest and Fireworks. But unfortunately, in some ways, them events haven't really got much better. I mean, last year for Scarefest was fantastic. You had a new scare zone, a new maze, theme around the Dark Forest. New investment, great, but it's definitely not up to the standards that it used to be. And with the fireworks, the theme last year was very interesting. It was like based around AI. But again, originally, I think they cut it down to 2 days, but then they put it back to 3. So that was great. Because I remember the last time we had only 2 days was in 2016. I think that was the year after the unfortunate incident on the Smiler. And that was one of the years I actually went. And it was a great year. It's themed on Galactica, but there was only 2 nights. You know, the Saturday, the Sunday, having the Friday is really good because it's a bit quieter. You know, you got a bit more room to see the fireworks because it does get very busy for the event. I definitely think they need to be focusing on flat rides. They need to completely have a massive overhaul of Tower Street because, a lot of that infrastructure is there from when the park originally opened back in the 80s. So, it's really old and, a lot of it needs redoing. A lot of the parks, unfortunately, falling apart. And you definitely notice that when you go often. To the average visitor who's only going once a year, maybe, they probably won't notice things like paint flaking off buildings and stuff. But as a visitor that goes often, Merlin pass holders, they're going to notice these things and they're going to comment on them. So it's definitely things that they need to be working on. I know for a fact they don't have as many gardeners now. And in terms of ride availability, I don't even know if that's down to not having enough engineers to get around in the morning. There's so many things to think about, but not enough answers. And I definitely think the park can get back to how it used to. But with the way it's been currently run, I just can't see it happening for quite some time, unfortunately. Because what makes a theme park, of course, is entertainment as well. So obviously when they stripped all the entertainment back, because they did have actors in Gloomy Wood for Curse Hall Manor, and they also had Phalanx down in Forbidden Valley as well. And they really made the experience, you'd interact with them. It'd be so much fun. But since they removed all that aspect, it just feels a bit like not very nice atmosphere, And when you go to a theme park, you want a fantastic, amazing atmosphere. But when you don't have entertainment around, it's just not ideal. And I know a lot of people would say, well, I don't really care because I just go on the rides. But unfortunately, yes, you may only go on the rides, but to a lot of people, entertainment is really important. Even if it doesn't matter to you, it does matter to a lot of other people. And with me in particular, I love going for the rides. I live over 2 hours away. But I also love to see entertainment. Entertainment makes your day even more special. And I think that's something they're really missing. And I think that's something that Disney do really well. Disney and Universal, they have loads of entertainment. Europa Park as well, I went to in Germany. That's a fantastic place for entertainment as well. So I do think the entertainment does make a massive difference. And that's something they're really lacking. And that's what I loved about having more events. And I know they're trying to save a bit more money by putting it all into making their more popular events better. But just some of these little things, like bring back the pirate show. They used to have an amazing pirate show down in Mutiny Bay in the courtyard. That was so good. Why did they get rid of that? Back years and years ago, before CBeebies Land what it is now, when it used to be storybook, they used to have the ice show. They used to have so much going on. And, I know a lot of people that still love that ice show, so it'd just be fantastic to see stuff like that again. Hopefully things will get better and we'll see a better Alton Towers some point in the future, but as it stands at the minute, there's a lot of work that needs doing. Everything from food, ride availability, filler rides, just so much of everything. And I know I've covered a lot in this podcast. It is the first one, so it may not be as long as some upcoming podcasts, but I thought I'd just sit down here, get some stuff off my chest, and I'd love to know what you guys think as well, because there's so much, because I know a lot of people who would agree with me a lot on this, but I know a lot of people wouldn't agree and they would say it's the best park in the world, and that's fine, you're entitled to your opinion. But of course, these are my views, and I don't know if I've covered every single little detail about what's wrong with Alton Towers at the minute, but if you have anything that I've missed, please leave it down in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching the first Attractions and Beyond podcast. And if you enjoyed this one, please leave a like and feel free to subscribe to keep up to date with everything theme park related. You've been watching the Attractions and Beyond podcast, and we'll see you in the next one.